Welcome to This Just In, the show bringing you the latest advancements in healthcare, strategy, innovation, and public policy. And now, for the fastest voice in healthcare, here's your host, Justin Barnes.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to a special edition of This Just In Radio. I'm your host, Justin Barnes. Today we're broadcasting live from Tampa, Florida, and the Moffitt Cancer Center with a very special show as our next installment in our Cancer Innovation Series. Many thanks to longtime friends Dr. Kamal Jethwani and Dr. Nainesh Parikh for the invitation and opportunity to be here. We're about to embark on a series of episodes focused on cancer care, innovation, patient outcomes, and survivorship. I hope you find all these episodes as enlightening, as encouraging as me. Welcome back to This Just In Radio show, broadcasting live from the Tampa Palms Country Club and the Moffitt Cancer Center. We're continuing on our Cancer Innovation and Best Practices series. Welcome back to Dr. Parikh, Moffitt's Vice President and Chief Clinical Expansion and Partnership Officer, and Kamal Jethwani, Moffitt's Vice President Digital Ventures and the CEO of AccelerOnc. Welcome back, gentlemen, for our next segment. Very excited about this, clinical innovation and best practices. So we're recording this mid-2026. What is the single most important shift in cancer treatment that has happened in the last 12 to 18 months that every clinician and health system leader should understand?
I'll take that one first.
Perfect.
So I think the most important shift is a focus on precision medicine and targeted therapies. I think, to date, people have been talking about it for 5 to 7 years. I've been at Moffitt for 10 years. I came out of training 10 years ago, and I remember constantly hearing about personalized medicine. I think it's great. Everybody was talking about it, but I think we're finally seeing rubber meets the road. And I think the focus on diagnostic tools up front, the focus on, and when I say diagnostic, I mean molecular markers, precision markers. It's not just you've got colon cancer, get chemo. It's What are your markers? What is your exact signature? And then even on top of that, how do we monitor your disease, right? It's not as simple as just imaging. So to keep it short, I think the focus on true precision medicine and that proof in the pudding now, I think, is really what's driving change and innovation. And I think you'll see more targeted therapy companies, diagnostic tools, and prognosticators come through. Never mind, minimal and residual disease monitors. I think the next 10 years, that's where I'm most excited.
So you brought that up on our last segment, and my only follow-on thought to that or question is, how much of that is their own IP, and how fast can other companies pick up where they're leaving off or they're innovating?
So I think there's two points to that. Number one, I think the fact that, for example, RevMed can unlock the key for targeted therapy is fantastic. What I know is that there's other clinical trials out there focusing on KRAS inhibitors as an example. But I think the fact that people can now understand that it's possible gives more innovation.
Okay.
Right, and more motivation, for the innovation, right? And I think companies are seeing like, hey, if they can do it, why can't we? I think they're also seeing how quickly it got done on the research side. So the phase 1 trials that led to approval, it's not as though they needed to go through multiple steps. We talked about in the last segment that I'm concerned about the time to commercialization and distribution. That's a different discussion. But the fact that they were able to get from where they were as a scientific thought process through the phase 1 trials and release the data to show the impact, to me means that there's so much room to grow for so many of these cancers, pancreas being one of them. There's just, we need innovation quickly.
Right.
And I think that type, the science is there. And I think, again, we talked about it last time. I really think the AI wave can really be impactful in that area where people are now really encouraged that we can find these keys that we couldn't previously find.
So what I'm most proud of is that how optimistic that you're being in that last segment.
You're welcome.
Come on, we're rubbing off on him.
I know. Don't worry.
This is unparalleled.
I'll try everything I can to bring the pessimism back.
I'm sure you'll bring it back. But what are some of your thoughts, Kamal?
I totally agree. I think the way we are looking to treat cancer is changing, and I think that's exciting. I think at the end of the day, the eventual vision of like there's a very unique, specific drug made for every single cancer, every single patient, and everyone's going to be on something different based on what's the specific makeup of what their cancer is. I think that's a really exciting move, and I think we're seeing that happen a lot more with more of these drugs coming out. And again, I think if you think about the challenge of precision medicine, the way to solve it is you need to have all the molecules and you need to have all the drugs. You need to have the right diagnostics in place, right? and now you need to be able to have a matchmaking engine that makes all that happen. The reality of making sure that this is actually getting done involves a lot more. And again, we're also starting to see a little bit of moves in there, but not enough, right? So today, as an example, 50% of lung cancer patients that are eligible for precision diagnostics don't get them. So where are you going to do precision medicine if you don't even know what their specific mutations are, right? But half of them are not getting it today. Or, when you do give them precision diagnostics, they go to physicians that don't know how to match them to precision medicine, right? So those are the specific challenges that I think would be exciting to solve. And when the two sides meet, right, discovery meets implementation is when we'll make this reality happen.
Love it. So continuing down this path, ASCO breakthrough, just wrapped up. The American Society of Clinical Oncology, ASCO, it wrapped up with AI, liquid biopsy, and biomarkers, biomarker-driven treatment as the defining themes. From where you sit, what moved from promise to practice at that meeting? You guys brought this up in the last segment, so I'm glad we had time for it now.
Yeah. So I think all three of those components, lastly, is probably AI. But biomarker-driven treatment, I think, is what really has been moving. And again, we alluded to it in the last segment, I mentioned it in the last segment, but I'll allude to it now. Yes. The number of patients who rapidly digested that information is incredible.
Yeah.
I think in years past, patients would have found there would have been a pretty significant time lapse between when the scientific and medical community knows about an innovation, and then maybe 6 months, 12 months, maybe even years until the patients really represent, oh my gosh, this is incredible, right? I think maybe it's social media, maybe it's AI, maybe it's patient interest, maybe it's, if I'm a pessimist, it's the fact that younger people are dying from cancer, so people are just motivated. Yeah. Whatever it is, I think the fact that patients are now knowing rapidly, as evidenced by the number of emails that we all get about wanting to be on a specific therapy, I think that's the biggest excitement. I think the second biggest excitement is the number of companies popping up, the number of technologies popping up that allow patients to have personalized medicine be done as a function of their personal signature, their DNA signature, their molecular tumor signature, and not just one, but throughout the entire tumor. And then in addition, how that impacts prognosis, right? So I think the ability to monitor for disease recurrence, it's not as simple as just cell-free DNA. I mean, people are looking at mutational signals coming out. I think those two topics to me are actually the most exciting. And I think you're seeing that shift occurring, right? You see it with Revolution Med coming out. You see it with some of our cohort companies. Even last year, some of our cohort companies really focusing on precision medicine and tumor markers for patients. And their concern is we can't get enough tissue, but the technology is out there, to Kamal's point. So we're hopefully more quickly than slowly matching those two sides of the coin up.
Love it. Anything you would add? No? Awesome. So let's walk. I always like to bring the patient into the conversation as soon as possible. So walk us through a real world example, obviously without naming a patient, where technology-enabled approach changed the treatment decision and changed the outcome. And what does that look like in practice? I mean, as a practicing physician, when we start with you.
Honestly, Justin, that's a little bit of a hard one. I don't want to pound the point home on the precision medicine because I do think that's important. I'll take a moment to maybe plug my own practice, which is using something called prostate artery embolization before men get radiation. So the number of times that men have urinary functional decline after radiation for prostate cancer is up to 30 to 40%, and it's really predicated upon the size of their prostate and their baseline urinary symptoms. At Moffitt, we've created an algorithm where we use this technology. That's what I do all day. I did 4 of them yesterday to help men reduce the volume of their prostate. They urinate better, and then they come out on the other side of radiation much improved. I guess my point is I'm impressed that so many men now find us. Obviously I've got the Moffitt brand behind me, and I put out podcasts and I put out plenty of clinical trial research, but the ability for men very quickly to find this information and to directly target and get in. Actually, their biggest complaint is the access problem at Moffitt. And we're actively solving it, and that's a different discussion. Yes. But the ability to get directly into me, the number of men that have actually emailed me directly, and have said, hey, I've read your papers, I've listened to your podcast. I actually think that's the excitement. And while it's not, it's definitely self-interested, but what's exciting about it is that people are more quickly finding that access themselves to the therapies that they think they need. Even men who may not be eligible are finding me.
Right.
And I think that's just a measure and a representation of the excitement in the community, in the patient community, around what can be possible for men. And more men are clamoring for novel therapies. I really focus on a tiny little slice of men who've got locally confined prostate cancer and have urinary symptoms, but this happens time and time and time again. Whether it's a liquid tumor, it's an advanced solid tumor, people are finding out the information quickly using every resource possible. And I think that's really exciting.
I love it. And also, and Jake, we want to note this, the amount of phone calls and interest that you've received, how directly related is it to my radio show? Because you've been on for about 2 years now. So over the last 2 years, that increase, we're going to map that.
We're going to map that, although I'd like to see more.
Absolutely. Dr. Jethwani,
I'll take a more sort of operational perspective on this, right? So instead of giving you a patient story, I'll just talk about the process. And we've done this before.
Yes, absolutely.
As Nain said, there is a access problem. So at Moffitt, from the point of referral to the point that you get seen, it's a 23 to 28 day wait, right? And a lot of that is based on how we collect your records, how much time it takes for us to go contact everyone you've been at and figure out what was going on with you, collecting them, getting the right records in place, getting the right tissue samples in place, getting the imaging in, and then summarizing it and preparing for your visit. All that is what takes the time, right? It's not as if we don't have availability. We do have availability, but we just need the time to be able to better prepare for your visit. All of this is happening in advanced centers like Moffitt because we see patients who have failed first-line treatment for the most part, right? We don't see not only naive patients. Using AI, we have now been able to demonstrate that we can cut that time down in 4 to 5 days. So now think about a stage 4 cancer patient that has failed one line of treatment, right? Instead of waiting 28 days, right, or potentially just hearing that they have to wait 28 days and going somewhere else,
right,
now we're able to see them in 4 to 5 days, potentially, right, using the power of AI. Now, obviously, behind the AI, you need to think about the workflows and the people and the satisfaction there, and we're working through that, right? Yes. And that's the big messy middle that we're having to figure out. But that's an example of where AI has now actually been able to promise us and deliver on the promise that we can see you faster. If we can see you faster, now we can get you better treatments, we can get you eligible for more things. I think all of that sort of helps you with treatment outcomes. Similarly, we had another company through CancerX, Lind AI, that actually went through and has signed a really big deal with Advocate around clinical trial matching. They did a pilot, a 120 patient pilot, where they had humans manually go through and find patients in a cohort for trials. And they were able to find about 20 to 24% of that population was eligible for trials. The technology for the same exact cohort was able to find an additional 24 patients. They found every single patient the human found, and they found an additional 24 patients.
Wow.
They went back then and went to the humans and said, look at these extra 24 and tell us if this was correctly done or was it false positives. Every one of those patients was correctly identified.
Wow.
Right? Now start thinking about how we can think about faster discovery, more drugs to market, getting them in faster, helping more patients. So just 2 examples of where AI is actually making a difference today.
Love that.
So, I completely agree with all of that. I would say one follow-on. The direct examples at the patient level where you can say AI very specifically led to a better outcome, it's actually challenging. And it's not to say that we don't believe in AI.
Right.
It's not to say that it's too much hype. I think from my perspective, the point is it's not a one-to-one solution. I think AI creates, whether you call it an orchestration layer, you create a fabric behind the provider, behind the patient. What it's doing is a little bit of, elevating, raising tides lift all boats, right? So I just think that I actually sometimes want to just frame the discussion differently. It's essentially using supercharged technology to make life better. And there's all the ways where you could potentially talk about a singular solution resulting in a great outcome, and we love those stories. But the truth of the matter is, I think it's an evolution, or really a revolution in the way patient care is going to get delivered, much, related to what Kamal was saying in the last segment.
Right.
I think just that wave of change is happening, and I think within the next couple of years, we'll no longer think about a point solution, and we'll say, look, this is just the way it's done.
Right.
Because access has been reduced to 4 or 5 days. because patient records are now available across all sites, all imaging platforms. Clinicians no longer have to say, hey, why don't I have the images from this random imaging center in Central Florida before I do my procedure, which is a problem I face still to this day. So I want to point out that just because there's not a dedicated specific patient story doesn't mean that we think that it's not happening.
Correct. No, I totally agree. So we'll shift a little bit, deploying best practices across health systems. So there's a real gap between what leading academic centers, cancer centers can do and are doing and what is accessible at the community hospital or health system in a rural market. This is an area that's near and dear to my heart. So what is the most deployable best practice from your institution that more systems should be adopting right now? So we'll start off with you, Kamal, please.
So I think specifically sticking to this theme of access, AI, et cetera, right? I think that being able to bring in clinical guidelines, protocols in the best possible way, in an easily digestible way to practitioners at the point of care, I think is important. And I think that could be a game changer for community practices, rural practices. I think being able to start to think a little bit more about what therapies can you start to deploy safely within the community and not be scared of it, right? I think that's important. And again, good for the bottom line, good for the patient, right? And so I think those are some practices or guidelines that I think could be usul.
Well, let's take a moment, because you, in the last episode segment, in case someone missed it, you listed 4 reasons why these types of innovations make sense. So you remember, can you get back to me a couple seconds?
Yeah, so I think the conversation was about delivering cell therapy in the outpatient setting, right? And today, 90% cell therapy is being delivered at the AMCs. And so people have to travel 2 or 3 hours to get there. And some of these you need to be there on a daily basis. Outpatient CAR-T can now be delivered in the community, and there's a lot of benefits to that. Number one, anything delivered in the community is cheaper than delivered at the AMC, 20 to 30%. So everybody saves money. Good for the payers, good for the providers, good for the patients. Yeah. Patients can get the treatment where they are, sometimes just sitting at home. So the convenience factor is really good. Community doctors get to retain their patients, right? So they're not losing revenue out. And they're actually being able to maintain that care for their patients. So I think that's really incredibly important for them. And really thinking about how we can start to do this in a safe way. I think that overall, all stakeholders, employers, payers, community doctors, and patients win by doing this, because there's something in it for everyone.
Absolutely.
Now, the only way you can humanly deploy this, right, and you can actually benefit from it, is if you're able to keep the patient in the outpatient setting, right, so that they do not have an inpatient admission. Yes. And the only way you can do that is through technology. You need remote monitoring. You need to be able to make sure that you're assessing the patient at every given time, almost as if they were inpatient. And that can be done through remote monitoring. That can be done through using AI tools to be able to parse the symptoms or parse the real-time data that's coming in from the patients and give intelligence to physicians, because a human is not going to be sitting there and looking at this 24/7, right? So being able to make those things happen, I think, could be really cool. And that's a really good way for community hospitals to be able to start to deliver more advanced care.
Where would, in just a couple seconds, where would somebody go from a community hospital or a rural hospital go to learn some of those things, like to meet up with maybe a Moffitt? Is there a certain show? Is it ASCO Breakthroughs? Or where would it be that someone could go and learn that in a hypersecond?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's not easy to come, and that is probably why it's taking the amount of time it's taking, right? But specialized groups, I think AccelerOnc, shameless plug, one of our big motivations right now is to move care to the community.
Right.
And so if you are a community practitioner, rural practitioner, come join us. Like, we have so much going on in this area. I think that there are a lot of technology shows that actually focus on this. So, Health, Vive, et cetera, do talk about this. I think some of the more specific cancer shows don't actually talk about some of these things.
Right.
So again, branching out to more like AI technology shows, I think could be another important point.
Love that.
So a couple comments. First of all, to answer your last question, I think shows like this that we're recording right now, I think as they get larger and larger, I think patients can find them more easily. This is obviously a medium that people are digesting, podcasts, video podcasts, whatever you want to call it. I think things like this are exactly what we need to be doing as a community to get information out to the patients. I want to touch on, going back to your question very quickly, 2 things. Excitement to me also should be around screening and prevention. We haven't touched on it yet.
Yeah,
and I think, for example, at Moffitt, we have a task force where, and shamelessly, I'm trying to plug this, I think we should be coming up with standards and guidelines for screening and prevention, number one, because I think that when they make it to the U.S. task force, I think they're just a little bit outdated. right? So in the first place, I think those guidelines, we should take it upon ourselves at a place like Moffitt to deliver those for people, for people in this country. And the second thing is I think there's a lot of excitement around personalized screening and personalized prognosis. So knowing your cancer risk, not just as a function of your family history, but as your genetic markers, as your environmental exposures, as your diet, as a function of your diet, your job, your workout mechanisms. To me, I think that would potentially really move the needle, right? Because we know that if you catch it early or you catch it before it even happens and you can reduce your exposure, now you're talking. So I really think that those two areas are important to focus on moving the needle from the AMC out to the community. The last thing I'll say is, and we don't have to belabor this point, some sort of guideline compliant care is paramount. And I think the more you can do guideline compliant care, the better you'll see outcomes improve, or the more you'll see outcomes improve.
Love that. Excellent. Equity keeps coming up. Access to genomic testing, clinical trials, novel therapies. What is one of the concrete best practices that's making measurable difference in reaching underserved patients with better treatment options? That's a tough one.
Yeah, really hard one. I mentioned in the last segment the Philadelphia initiative, right? And how 3 AMCs are working together to improve disparities and improve equity. I think measures like that, even though they're early, will prove out outcomes. Okay. Truth of the matter is, I'm not aware of one magic bullet that improves that, because it's not as though communities are all, like communities that are rural, not always actively engaged with their own care, and it's no one's fault. I think it's just a different mindset and culture. So the truth of the matter is, I think that's an exciting opportunity what they're doing in Philadelphia. I really don't know of a single model that works, if that makes sense, to be honest with you.
Mm-hmm. Well, and also, I'll do a follow-up before we pass off to Kamal. But you guys are even here, you're expanding. You moved, actually, isn't there a whole innovation process in that moved north? Because when we recorded last time, you lived on the wall.
Yeah, so I guess you're right. And I should shamelessly plug our own department and the work we're doing at Moffitt. We are trying to go out into the community in a very slim way, so that we have a presence for people directly in their community. And I actually think it's not about, as Kamal said, building the glass buildings, but it is about having a functional presence locally, so that you're not kind of just a face on a screen, and you're not a brand on the TV. You're in the community doing the work, right? So I think AMC's going out to the community and really embracing that is one piece. I think in addition, yes, we are moving the majority of our research platforms, specifically focused on cellular and immunotherapy and radiopharmaceuticals, to our Pasco campus. That's about 30 miles north of our main campus.
Right. Excellent. Come on, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question. And I think that there's a lot of factors that affect who we care for and how we care for them, especially as you're thinking about equity, right? So affordability comes up a lot, and people on Medicaid as an example. So let's just take that. We have about 30 to 34% of our referrals are patients that are either Medicaid or underinsured in some way, right? But those are people who get referred to us. Those are not the people who get care from us. Right. And the gap between the patients who are getting referred to us versus the patients in single digits percentages that eventually get care from us, right? That is not a lack of intention on our part. That is the gap between them getting referred to us and then actually being able to make it to get a full treatment from us. Right. What a lot of that constitutes is operational barriers, right? Do they even have the transportation to be able to come in? Do they even have the ability to pay the first copay? Do they even have the ability to sort of come in and do the testing that we're asking them to do out of pocket before they're able to get reimbursed? Like, there's a lot of things that are happening there. 30% patients have self-reported that transportation was the reason that they no-showed to their first visit. Absolutely. Right? Now, from a compliance standpoint, we cannot actually help them with that because that is seen as inducement, right? So from a policy perspective, we're not allowed to help them. From an equity perspective, we want to help them, right? But but they can't get the help from us or anyone else. And so this basically creates a circle for these patients that now they're just unable to get the care that they're looking for. That's just one little example of how something like transportation creates that much of a barrier where you're going from 30% referrals to single digits actually coming in and showing up, right? Highest cause for no-shows in the first visit is that for that population.
Absolutely.
So if you take that as an example, and if you sort of spread that out across the entire treatment journey, think about the patients who are eligible for a clinical trial, but the trial is in San Antonio and they live in Tampa, and the only slot available is 4 states away, right? 9 could fly his mom every week, right? And doesn't matter, drop in the bucket. How many patients can afford that, right? And that is not covered by insurance.
Well, yes, I did do that for mom, and yes, that I was happy to do that for mom. But to your point, it wasn't even just the cost; it was really the time. Yeah. I was supported by all my colleagues at Moffitt to be able to do things like that and to take mom there. And I understand it. You know, the clinical trials, for example, are such that they're very regimented about who needs to be seen in person, what's the time frame. Yeah. Never mind the fact that taking a patient who doesn't feel well, you know, mom didn't really feel like traveling all that much. Yeah. And it's not as though she was going to, especially in the last 6 months of her life, uproot her entire life and go live in San Antonio. Right. So what he's just scratching the tip of the iceberg when he speaks to the cost of transportation. Never mind, you know, shameless plug for CancerOnc, we're trying to reduce the financial toxicity. Imagine if I had a shift job where I didn't have support and I was losing out those hours of compensation. That would be really hard, you know, especially if it was a single income family, et cetera, et cetera.
We had 230 hospitals shut down, rural hospitals shut down last year, right? And then now think about that. That's fine. It's a number. It's a statistic. Yeah. It doesn't really matter. But the consequence of that is people now having to travel 90 minutes one way every day for infusion.
Wow.
So you get a 5-day-a-week infusion for 6 weeks. Yep. You're not allowed to drive, by the way, but you have to go 90 minutes away one way to be able to get that care. That means that a caregiver is not going to work. That means that caregiver might be the person that is giving you the insurance, right? And now your whole family is in disarray. 47% patients filed for bankruptcy within 3 years of a cancer diagnosis. Right. And that number doesn't change with your income.
Thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate it. This is
Absolutely.
Awesome. Fantastic. And that's a wrap from here at Moffitt Cancer Center. Many thanks to my good friends Kamal and Nainesh for joining me. A great spectrum of shows covering cancer innovation, best practices, but also the key to success, happiness, and the importance of mentoring. So I'm grateful for the opportunity to be here and look forward to many more shows coming from this campus and probably Tampa in general, as these good friends and I look to bring this great content to you. And hopefully you find it as, again, encouraging and enlightening as myself. Have a great rest of your day, and thank you so much.